Throughout this video, I will be discussing the meaning of a book written in 1942 by French author and philosopher Albert Camus. And the book is called The Myth of Sisyphus. And even though the book is really small, it only has 134 pages in my edition, it's full of interesting ideas. So Albert Camus, he was one of the most important contributors to absurdist philosophy. And absurdism is a kind of a scary philosophy. Its proponents fundamentally argue that life does not have any inherent meaning, and that any attempts at finding meaning are doomed to fail in the end. And of course, this does not sound very optimistic. However, in my opinion, the Myth of Sisyphus ends on a rather optimistic note, which I will discuss at the end of this video. So throughout this analysis of the Myth of Sisyphus, I will discuss if and how this philosophy can be considered optimistic. So Camus argued that something which he called the absurd is always present in our lives. And according to Camus, everyone will experience the absurd at one point in his or her life. He wrote, "It symbolizes that odd state of soul in which the void becomes eloquent, in which the chain of daily gestures is broken, in which the heart vainly seeks the link that will connect it again, then it is, as it were, the first sign of absurdity." In this sense, the absurd can, for instance, take the form of a crisis or a sudden moment of complete consciousness of the absurdity of life. We might suddenly become aware of the absurd at any moment, according to Camus, who wrote, "Rising, tram, 4 hours in the office or factory, meal, tram, 4 hours of work, meal, sleep, and Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, according to the same rhythm. This path is easily followed most of the time, but one day the why arises and everything begins in that weariness tinged with amazement." According to Camus, after awakening to the absurd, one will notice that the absurd is present in many ways throughout one's daily life. For instance, Camus illustrated that time is absurd as well. He wrote, "He belongs to time, and by the horror that seizes him, he recognizes his worst enemy. Tomorrow, he was longing for tomorrow, whereas everything in him ought to reject it." According to Camus, we should reject tomorrow because time will eventually kill you. But still, we cannot wait until we are grown up or until we retire, because we're always looking towards the future. However, as Camus argued, the future will eventually kill us. According to Camus, once one becomes slightly conscious of the absurd, more and more things will start to feel strange. He wrote, "A step lower and strangeness creeps in, perceiving that the world is dense, sensing to what degree a stone is foreign and irreducible to us, with what intensity nature or a landscape can negate us. At the heart of all beauty lies something inhuman." As a result of all of these sudden revelations from the absurd, Camus argued that we might find ourselves in an uncomfortable position. According to Camus, the world might no longer make any sense. Through tales and habits we have masked the true nature of the world. Our old world is shattered and we must face the world as it really is, an absurd place. Camus argued that it is impossible to deny the absurd. Any efforts made to give meaning to the world, as also argued by the philosophical school of absurdism, are useless. Camus argued that this is the case because it is simply impossible to know anything for certain. "This heart within me I can feel, and I judge that it exists. This world I can touch, and I likewise judge that it exists. There ends all my knowledge, and the rest is construction." Because one knows so little, it is useless to give any meaning to anything, according to Camus. And furthermore, Camus proposes that it is even impossible for anyone to clearly grasp the self. He wrote, "For if I try to seize the self of which I feel sure, if I try to define and to summarize it, it's nothing but water slipping through my fingers. Between the certainty I have of my existence and the consent I try to give to that assurance, the gap will never be filled. Forever I shall be a stranger to myself." So perhaps you agree that so far all of this does not sound very promising. It sounds quite absurd. And according to Camus, this is normal because there is no inherent meaning to our life on this planet. And to make things even worse, our lives are, while being meaningless, also absurd. However, the absurd should not necessarily be considered a bad thing, according to Camus. He wrote, "The absurd is not in man, if such a metaphor could have a meaning, nor in the world, but in their presence together. For the moment it is the only bond uniting them. A single certainty is enough for the seeker. He simply has to derive all the consequences from it. As such, since we are not certain of anything except for the existence of the absurd, we can use the absurd to guide us, according to Camus. Man can draw a certain form of strength from his acceptance of the absurd, and he can decide to live without any hope for meaning or a happy ever after fantasy, and thereby accept his fate by accepting the absurd." Camus wrote, "The absurd man thus catches sight of a burning and frigid, transparent and limited universe in which nothing is possible, but everything is given. and beyond which all is collapse and nothingness. He can then decide to accept such a universe and draw from it his strength, his refusal to hope, and the unyielding evidence of a life without consolation. Similarly to Camus, Friedrich Nietzsche in his book Human All Too Human also argued that hope is one of the greatest evils, disguised as a source of happiness. Nietzsche wrote, "Now man has his box of happiness perpetually in the house and congratulates himself upon the treasure inside of it. It is at his service. He grasps it whenever he is so disposed, for he knows not that the box which Pandora brought was a box of evils. Hence he looks upon the one evil still remaining as the greatest source of happiness. It is hope. Therefore, by accepting the absurd and therefore living without hope, one would rid oneself of one of the greatest sources of evil. Being aware of one's life, one's revolt, one's freedom, and to the maximum is living, and to the maximum." So now it is up to us to decide whether Albert Camus' book, The Myth of Sisyphus, is absurd, or whether the world around us is absurd. I believe that The Myth of Sisyphus puts forward a remarkable, interesting theory, a theory which does make more sense after investigating it further. However, what I think is equally interesting is that we can, even from accepting that the world is meaningless and absurd, still find a form of meaning in this meaninglessness. As such, The Myth of Sisyphus can to a certain extent be considered an optimistic book as well, despite looking rather pessimistic in the beginning. So thank you for watching this video. Please let me know in the comments what you think about Camus' Myth of Sisyphus, and do you think the world is absurd or whether this book is absurd. Thank you.